When the dates show, February 13th, 1258. The water sounds suddenly cut off in that majestic palace that had hosted the 36-year reign of the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mustasim. The silence of the fountains decorating the golden halls is the first news. Of the approaching disaster, in a capital like Baghdad, where scholars who had crossed deserts and seas gathered to reach the largest library in the world, how the drying up of the fountains is not a good sign. This silence is the only truth that echoes. The end is near. And what is about to happen in the next 7 days is so terrible that Persian historians will refuse to put it in writing. But before I tell you about the most brutal event in medieval history, you need to understand who these men are that are about to forever change the fate of the Islamic world. Because just beyond the palace walls, the horizon line is closed by the Mongol army. Hundreds of thousands of warriors who burst out of the silence of the desert surround the city like a sea of horses. This army understands nothing of urbanism, philosophy, or books. They know only one language: conquest. And now only a few days remain to erase from the stage of history a civilization that has stood upright for 8 centuries. But the real event that will freeze the world's blood will not be the fall of Baghdad. The real horror will begin after the city gates are broken. The treatment reserved for the caliph, his wife, his sons and daughters, will pass as a black stain. On the history of humanity, what you will discover in the next few minutes is so shocking that even today, after 800 years, many historians prefer not to speak of it. To fully understand this destruction, you need to know the name at the center of the events. Al-Mustasim is not an ordinary ruler. He is the caliph, the one who is considered the shadow of God on earth, the successor of the Prophet Muhammad, and the leader of an immense empire that once extended from Spain to India. He is the 37th representative of the Abbasid dynasty, which lasted 800 years without interruption. But unfortunately, the dynasty is now old, and its self-confidence has turned into arrogance. Alam, must weak in character and fond of comfort, has filled his entourage with whisperers who only want to listen, while spending his days in luxury. He believes that his titles and traditions will protect him from any kind of danger. Even when the Mongols stand at the gates of Baghdad, he repeats the mistakes he has made throughout his life. He thinks the world will bend to his will. He has no doubt that God will protect him, no matter how savage the army. He thinks no one will dare attack his position as caliph. According to him, Baghdad is so sacred and important that it is impossible for it to fall, but he is gravely mistaken. Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, is leading the army opposite him, and when they stand at the gates of Baghdad, they are no longer a regular army. They are like a natural disaster that destroys whatever lies before them. They have erased more than 40 cities from the map in the lands of Iran. They have crushed
armies 10 times larger than themselves. In the places they have passed, they have given blood to the rivers. They have built warning towers from severed heads. Now the richest city in the world lies at their feet. Hulagu sends the clear and merciless message recorded by the Persian historian Atamalik Juvayni to Al-Mustasim. If you surrender, your life will be spared. If you resist, your city will be dust. Your palaces will turn to ash, your family will suffer, and your name will be erased from history. Al-Mustasim, reading the letter, only laughs. He gathers the palace staff and says, "These barbarians don't know who they are dancing with. I am a caliph. God will never abandon me." But the plans of fate or God are completely different, and what is about to happen will surpass all imagination. When the Mongol attack begins on January 29, 1258, it is not an ordinary siege. The Mongols not only have enormous force, but also gunpowder technology brought by Chinese engineers, explosives and siege machines that the Baghdadis have never seen before. The walls are beaten day and night. The sky trembles. The towers collapse one after another. The courage of the defenders is helpless against an enemy who has turned killing into an art. Baghdad is bleeding from the thousands of wounds it has received. On February 5th, the gates of the walls are opened. On the 10th day, resistance is completely broken. And finally, on February 13th, Hulagu stands erected in the Abbasid throne room. The caliph, who once believed he was untouchable, now lies on his knees in the dust next to his torn golden robe thrown to the ground. The divine shield has lifted. Only the feared dying man remains. Al-Mustasim begs for mercy. Hulagu looks at him with cold curiosity, as if looking at a hunter fallen into his own trap. Historian Rashid al-Din conveys that moment as follows. Hulagu asks, "Where is God now?" Even though the caliph's lips move, there is no sound. Is he praying, or is he holding his tongue out of fear? No one knows. Hulagu laughs and adds, "Since you loved gold so much, let's see if gold will feed you." And at that moment, one of the most humiliating scenes in history takes place. The Mongols lay out in the throne room the treasure that the empire had accumulated for centuries: gold, jewels, and sacred relics. The caliph's mouth fills with gold. Silver coins are crushed between his teeth. As the metal burns his throat, his teeth break, and his body rebels against this torture. The Mongols laugh. When he resists, he is beaten until he swallows. In this torture that lasts for hours, the caliph is not allowed to faint or die. Although his stomach is torn and swollen, his work is not yet finished, because this is only the beginning, and what will happen to the royal family will surpass even this horror. Hulagu orders the royal family to be brought to his presence. Al-Mustasim has 3 sons and 4 daughters. First comes the eldest daughter, Princess Fatima, 27 years old. This woman, who knew 5 languages, had been educated in philosophy, and whose poems were
translated from language to language. She grew up believing in the power of knowledge. Now she kneels before her father. The Mongol tradition provides special treatment for nobility, but this is not mercy, it is humiliation. Historians struggle to describe what happens next. Rashid al-Din, writing years later, manages to leave only this frustrating note: "What was done to her came true before her father's eyes, and when it was over, she could no longer live." Other sources are clearer in their meaning, even if not in details. The princess, poet, philosopher, woman of knowledge is reduced to a war trophy before the eyes of the most powerful father in the Islamic world, a man who could command armies, who could declare wars, who was considered the shadow of God on earth, forced to watch the unspeakable without being able to raise even a hand. But the night is not yet over. After Fatima, Hulagu calls for his sons. Although the caliph knows what will happen, he cannot stop this torment. Prince Mubarak, 23 years old, Prince Ahmed, 21 years old, and Prince Ali, 14 years old. They are young enough not to realize they have closed the doors of history. Hulagu looks at them as a butcher looks at his victims and repeats the question he posed to their father. They place this treasure before Al-Mustasim and force him to ingest it. "Where is your God now?" A brief hesitation occurs. The world has been destroyed so quickly that this moment seems unreal. Yesterday they were heirs to the empire. Today they are chained. Prince Mubarak, perhaps out of pride, perhaps with the last shred of his faith, steps forward and says, "God will punish you for this." Hulagu nods his head like a student who knows his lesson and quietly gives his order. According to Mongol belief, the shedding of noble blood brings misfortune. So there is no sword, no axe, there is only a carpet. The 3 princes are wrapped tightly in thick carpets. Then they are trampled by horses until every movement ceases. No blood is spilled, no blade touches royal skin, but bones break, lungs collapse, life is slowly crushed. The father watches all of this. He cannot even scream. He can only watch as his sons, the heirs of 800 years of dynasty, are crushed like insects. He has witnessed the disappearance of his children. The Mongols will not kill him immediately because Hulagu wants the final scene to be ceremonial. He orders the Caliph to be wrapped tightly like his sons. A wooden platform is installed over the man trapped in the dark, airless carpet. Hulagu and his generals hold a victory feast on this platform while the man lying beneath is slowly dying. They eat meat and drink wine on the table above him and laugh. Every movement, every weight crushes the carpet a little more. Every laugh cuts the Caliph's breath a little more. The feast lasts until dawn. When the last curtains are emptied, the carpet is opened. The Caliph's face is bruised, his eyes terribly open. There is no blood, no wound. There are only traces of suffocation. The 800-year-old Abbasid dynasty finds its end in that carpet, in the brief time of a week.
Terror does not remain limited to the palace walls. Baghdad is now defenseless. The Mongols spread like fire, burning dry grass. The massacre continues non-stop. Scholars, merchants, women, children, imams or beggars are not separated. Neighborhoods are destroyed within hours. Horses cannot pass through the piles of corpses. According to estimates, nearly 1 million people are slaughtered. The city where the brightest minds of the world lived transforms into an endless cemetery. But the real loss for humanity is not just the lives, it is what happens to the House of Wisdom, the pride of the Islamic world, the legendary library. Nowhere else in the world did such priceless manuscripts and scientific works exist. They are set on fire, were thrown into the Tigris River. First, the river is covered in ink, then blood flows. A scholar named Ibn Alati survives by hiding in a well. Days later, when he emerges, the sight he sees is as follows. I stayed in the well for 3 days. When I came out, the city was dead. The streets were covered with corpses. There was a smell of death in the air, and dogs were eating corpses. Imagine walking in your own city, and the only sound you hear is the buzzing of flies and screams in the distance. Imagine that a civilization has lost not only its people, but also its memory, art, dreams, and books. The Mongol Empire will rule for another 150 years, conquer vast lands, but the one thing they cannot conquer is memory. Even if Baghdad falls, what was done to the Caleb's family will not be forgotten. Those who survive pass this story from generation to generation in whispers. After centuries, these whispers reach us. The reason we tell them is not to heal the wounds, but because some truths are so terrible they cannot be forgotten. Because if we forget, history repeats itself. When the fall of Baghdad is mentioned, numbers come to mind. 1 million dead, a burned library. But numbers do not suffer. Numbers do not beg. Numbers do not know what it means to be alive. That is why we must linger a little longer on that week, because the end of a civilization is not a single moment. It is irreparable breaks that form chains. After the caliph dies under that platform, the fall does not stop. On the contrary, it becomes easier to kill. Now there is neither a deputy of God nor a sacred obstacle. The city is unoccupied. The Mongols do not rebuild the city. They do not stay there and rule. They burn, destroy, deliver their messages, and leave. Because the Mongol war machine moves non-stop. Baghdad is a warning sign, a bloody mark on the map. This tactic works. Other leaders in the Middle East surrender out of fear. Baghdad paid the price for them. However, as the Mongols advance westward, the world continues to talk about that palace scene. The suffocation beneath the caliph, the destruction before the princess's father's eyes, the princes wrapped in carpets. These details whisper like a curse. Because if these things can happen to Baghdad, everywhere is in danger. This awareness changes the course of history. The golden age of Islam does not end in one night, but its axis slips. The center is now Cairo, Damascus, Samarkand. The world continues to turn, but now there is a deep scar upon it. You can see this scar in the thicker walls of empires, in the transformation of libraries into fortresses. Those who flee from Baghdad scatter throughout the world. In Aleppo, Cairo, or Ukrainian villages, they tell of having seen their children at night. Perhaps not the wildest parts, but enough to keep the memory alive. The Mongols could destroy the buildings and burn the books, but they could not erase the memory. Over time, the Mongol Empire also shatters. The great Khans fall upon each other. But Baghdad remains a symbol. It remains as proof that even the most powerful civilizations, when they close their eyes to the world, can collapse. Al-Mustasim thought that his title would bring him immortality, but a belief far from reality is indifferent to blindness. If there is anything this story teaches us, it is that no civilization, no matter how rich and knowledgeable, is immune to collapse. Now, I want you to stop and think for a moment. Imagine those silent whispers. Remember that the first sign is not a scream, but a mute silence. Disasters always begin this way, like a normal day, until you lose everything you believe in. You have just witnessed one of the darkest weeks in human history. If this story reminded you of how cruel a person can be, do not allow this truth to be buried in silence again. Subscribe to Vox History and help us keep these buried pages of history alive. Because when we forget, history does not stay in the past. It comes out of its hiding place and repeats itself. And in the next videos, we will uncover other events that the world has tried to forget. Baghdad, 1258, 1 million dead, a lost civilization, a forgotten lesson.